Welcome to The Connecting Point.
All right, good morning. Thank you guys for letting us come today. My name is Nagle, for those that don't know me, and I'm a director of an agency called Uniting Hope for Children. I was here last year, I think in April or May, and just sharing with you guys about getting started with our agency and everything, and you guys were one of the first churches that had us out. You guys are also our first church that took a placement of a child, and so we appreciate what you guys do. And I want to share with you guys a little bit this morning about where we are and what we're doing, about how you can be involved, and then just some of the things that we deal with on a daily basis that we'd love to have you guys help with here in Loganville. And so let me go ahead and start. Go to the first slide right there. There's my first slide. For all you teenagers, I know you're going to be on your phones anyway, so you can go follow us on Instagram and Facebook. I think we're on Facebook too, so I don't do any of that, but that's us. We're a faith-based, we're a nonprofit organization, and what we do, we have a contract with the state of Georgia, and when children are removed by defects, they call us and we place them in Christian foster homes. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit about what's going on with the state in that area and how that's working. And anyways, here's the next thing. Here's our last year in a summary real quick. My wife and I started fostering about 2 years ago, and last January we were at First Baptist Loganville. We stepped off staff there to pursue opening a foster care agency. We thought, how hard can it be? And that proved to be an interesting question. And so we started off, and January 27th of last year, we went to our initial orientation with the state of Georgia in downtown Atlanta. My wife went with me along with a couple other people. We started off last January. We had one lady on staff who'd been there for 29 years, and for some unknown reason, she decided to go with me. And so we started off last January. I started off with one full-time employee. Somebody donated an office building for us to use for 2 years. And on January 27th, we went to our initial orientation. February 3rd, we heard all the stuff we had to do. We handed in our packet to get a license, and they pretty much laughed at us and said, "You don't have no idea what you're doing." We already knew that, but we were hoping we were going to be able to bluff a little while, and it didn't work. And so they gave it back to us, and they said, "You need to take this and start over." And so, which we did. And May 5th, we handed in our next packet. And I want to show it to you because I tell people this. People always go, "What do you like you people that aren't in church every week, what do y'all do during the week?" I'll just go around and talk. And so we spent really the first 9 months of last year writing paperwork. And I always say this, there's nothing that can create more paperwork than government and kids. Would you agree with that? You know what I'm saying? So all you school teachers, you know what I'm talking about, okay? And so let me show you the packet we finally handed in to get our license. This is it. It's 1,100 pages of policies, procedures, and forms that I wrote with Laura in my office. And that's what we handed in. So that was on May 5th. June 16th, we got a phone call from the state, and they said something to the degree of, private agencies, we don't pay them a lot of money. You got to be a nonprofit. We know why you have to be a nonprofit. So we really want to see $100,000 in your checking account before you can go any farther. Oh, well, that's... Just call my wife and transfer some funds. I'm just kidding, you know. I was like, well, you know, it's like, I wonder if my church would take me back. And I called them, and they said no. And so we had a board meeting, and a guy told me, he said, "Hey Wayne," he said, "I want you to call this man in Florida. He loves kids. I don't know if he'll give you the money, but just call him and talk to him." So I called him, and I said, "Listen, he's 7 hours away. He's an older gentleman," and I said, "I'd like to come meet with you and share my vision with you." He said, "Okay." He said, "Well, let's get together." And he said, "We'll talk on the phone." I said, I want to come see you." So I drove down to Florida a couple days later, and had lunch with him and his wife. And long story short, the next morning, he wired $100,000 into our checking account. He said, "You can't use it." But, yeah, I was excited about that. He said, "You can't use it, but you can let the state look at it." So I was good with that. I was just nice to have it. And so you know, and as far as they know, it's there, and it's still there. And so it's there so they can look at it. And so we got that on June 20th. August 4th, we received our license from the state of Georgia to take children into our agency. And so basically from January 1st last year to August 4th last year, this is what we did. We worked on this packet every day, writing 6, 8, 10 hours a day sometimes. And if you know anything about me, that is not my skill set. That is God's sense of humor in my life, that I would do that he would even call me to do that. And then they said, it's kind of like getting a business license. You get a license, and then they said, "Hey, would you guys like a contract to actually do the work?" And we're like, Well, yeah. We said, well, you got to get a license before you get a contract. We got a license. They said, well, you can get a contract. And so we began working on a contract, which was another book that didn't line up with the same policies with the first book, because if they did that, that would make a lot of sense. And so we worked on this book. So we wrote another book, an entirely separate book of policies and procedures, because one is ruled by DHS and one's ruled by DFACS, and evidently they don't get along, or they don't talk, or they don't even know each other exist. But we got them. And so so we handed that in, and September 27th, we went down and we handed it into the state, and the state said, hey, this is great. We're going to go ahead and put you guys in the next cycle. Your contract will start July 1st, 2015. And I was a little bit, it's like I got 9 more months of payroll from a business side to run this business, keep everybody interested. And but something happened. God started doing something that he was preparing for September 27th a long time ago. 3 years ago, my wife and I started fostering. And April 8th of this year, we adopted 2 little girls. They were here last year at your church. You remember I brought them on stage as foster children. They're not foster children anymore. They're adopted children now. And God was working in our life. And April 8th of this year, when we adopted those 2 little girls, 4 days later, I was at a church, First Baptist Conyers, in a room full of about 10 people. And I shared our story. And a man came up to me, and his name was David Hammonds. He was actually in your church last night. He's one of our foster parents. And he said, I've been helping a homeless lady in Atlanta for 3 years, and she looks like your oldest daughter. And I said, there's no way. I said, but if you ever see her again, ask her what her name is. Okay. I had the birth certificate. He calls me up a month later. He said, Wayne, this is her name. It was the biological mother of our 2 little girls, Abby and Ashley. He said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to meet her. So my wife and I went down there a couple times. We didn't find her. Finally, my son and I, my 14-year-old son, we went down there. It's a long story. I could take an hour to share it all. We went down there, and we found her asleep on the side of the road in an alleyway, bugs and trash and everything you would expect. And we got a chance to talk to her. And we shared with her about how that God had given her girls a second chance, and they had a home, and they had brothers and sisters, and that we loved them, and that God would give her a second chance too. And we gave her food, and we gave her clothes, and we gave her a picture of both her little girls in a Ziploc bag so she could keep it, and at night be reminded that even though she didn't have her kids, she was a mother, and that God loved her. And we got a picture, it's on our Instagram one week, of that mom holding that picture. Laura Burton in my office, she's a very talented lady. I have no idea why she works for me. And she wrote this thing, and she said, it's the first time that mom had held both her girls. And I was like, that is so cool. Because what we realize in foster care is we do help kids, but we also help parents. And sometimes we help kids sometimes we help parents, sometimes we have to take kids. And sometimes we don't. But anyway, so this story that we've been working on had gotten into the governor's office. And all this year, our state representative has been asked, hey, Wayne, would you go to Columbus and speak? Hey, Wayne, would you go to Savannah and speak? Hey, Wayne, would you go to Brunswick and speak? So all year they've been driving. I've been driving all the state for them. And all through this, God had been working this out. My thing was just to get churches involved in foster care, but God had been working for this September 27th date that we handed our license. And I want to tell you the rest of the story real quick. We saw the mom, gave her some things. My wife thought at Christmas Eve it would be a fun Christmas project to take our family down to downtown Atlanta to meet birth mom. And like all good husbands, when your wife says that she's heard from the Lord, what do you say? Yes, yes. You guys got some good marriages here. Did I think that was a good idea to take 7 kids down to the streets of Atlanta to look? No. But I said, yes, dear. And so we did. And so we took off down there. It was raining, and I had been down the day before for about 3 hours asking police officers and ambassadors because she's homeless. And I said, when you find her tomorrow morning, would you please not wake her up? Just leave her there. And they said, Mr. Nagle, we can't do that. She sleeps on businesses' doorsteps, and I said, so this guy didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. I went to his supervisor, I finally got to the head guy. And I told him a story, and he said, all right, we'll do it one time for you. So we get down to Atlanta about 7 o'clock Christmas Eve morning. If y'all remember, it was a beautiful day. It was raining and cold. And so we're down there walking around. 7 o'clock, we're in Atlanta in a parking lot. His phone doesn't ring. 7:30, 7:45. my spiritual gift is patience, so I'm calling them about every 5 minutes. You find her? Did you find her? Where's she at? Where's she at? Nothing. 8:15, my phone rings. Is this Mr. Nagle? Yes. Where you at? I said, I'm on 2 Peachtree Street. I want you to go 2 blocks south, turn left on Martin Luther King, and she's 1 block south on the side of the road. So we go, my family, we go running down there with my kids and 7 kids, my wife, downtown Atlanta. This is not safe for the whole family ministry. And so we go down through there, and we make the turn, and I had seen her before, and so I was kind of like standing back from her because I went to all these classes about how you don't encroach people too much, you give them a way of escape, and I'm saying her name, and I'm kind of knelt down so I'm not towering over her, and she wakes up and she looks at me and she goes, oh, you came back for me. And I said, yeah. And she goes, did you bring Caleb? And I said, yes, I got Caleb, my son. Did you bring your wife? I said, I got my wife. And, oh, that's great. That's great, Wayne. Thank you so much for coming. She goes, this will be the best Christmas gift ever. And I said, and I got my other kids with me. And she goes, you do? And I said, and I got the 2 kids that you birthed with me too. And so we let that mama hold those kids, and she loved them, and she kissed them, and it was the coolest thing, you know, that she got to do that. And I know this morning she woke up homeless. I know she has mental issues. I know all the stories. So you can tell me all the reasons we shouldn't do it. I promise you I've heard them all, you know. But that mom was created for a purpose. And those kids, no matter how they were conceived, were created for a purpose. And Jeremiah 29:11 just doesn't apply to the kids in the youth group. And so we had the coolest time. We took her to McDonald's. We ate with her, and it's a long story. But all through this year, the state's been saying, "Wayne, would you go share your story? Would you go share your story?" So I did. And so I bring it to the September 27th date. September 27th, we hand this packet in with our license, and I'm walking upstairs to meet with one of the state officials, the commissioner of all of DHS. And actually, I'm meeting with one of his assistants, and he walks in the room, and he said, "Why are you here today?" And I said, "Well, I was handing my contract." "What did they tell you?" I said, "Well, they told me it's going to be, it possibly could be July 1st of 2015 before we start placing." "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." That's all he said. He just walked out of the room. I said, "Well, I guess he's upset or something." And so I guess I said the wrong thing. And so we meet with him for a while and have some of my office staff there. We're getting on the elevator to leave 2 Peachtree Street, and my phone rings. "Is this Mr. Nagle?" "Yes." "Sean Johnson from Office of Provider Management," which she's like the lady that does everything. She's one of the few women, but she's one of the ones I tremble when she calls me now. And so she says, "Hey, you just handed your license in to me about 30 minutes ago." I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Oh, I just wanted you to know that I need your insurance, I need your workers' comp, I need your general liability. We have insurance for our insurance in this business, which is good." And I said, "Well, let me get it." She said, "I need it today." And I hadn't even bought it all yet because I didn't think I needed it. And I said, "Well, let me get it." So I called a friend of mine who's an insurance agent. I said, "Send them all this stuff." And he said, "Okay." And I said, "Well, why do I need this?" She said, "Your contract starts October 1st. We just got a phone call." And I thought, how cool is that? And I don't know where the call came from, and I'm not allowed to say. But she got a phone call. October 1st, we received a contract from the state of Georgia, and we started these things called CPS checks, which I have grown to hate those 3 letters. CPS checks is when they pull up any allegation that's ever been made on our families. They take anywhere from 10 days to 6 months to get done by the state. And so October 21st, we placed our first child. And it was a child in your church, and most of y'all may know him. You're going to hear from the family. They're going to do a testimony at the end today. October 22nd, we placed our second child. And February 1st, which was yesterday, we made this last week, we had 39 children with our agency. We actually have 40. We picked another one up Friday night. And 4 of our children have came through our agency and already gone back home. And they were good reunifications. And so there's 40 children tonight in the Walton Gwinnett area, Oconee Clark area, that are in godly homes that before October 1st were being abused in a home. And that's what we do every day. We are the largest child placement agency in Region 5 in the 14 counties that we are in. And we are number 15 in the state out of 79 agencies. We have 90 more homes in our process right now, and I've just hired a second lady to come in and do home studies so we can get homes approved faster. And my personality is when I'm focused on something, that's what we do, and that's what everything's about. And I'm going to share with you guys a little about that today. But I want to say thank you for Summit. You guys were one of the first churches to have us out to speak, and you guys have our first placement, and thank you for your support. We believe that the church is the answer to foster care. Right now, the gay and lesbian community is leading foster care initiatives. And I go to churches every week, and they say, that's horrible. And I say this, I wonder what's worse, the fact they do it or the fact we don't. When we stand before God someday, DFACS and our State Department will not be accountable for what happened to orphans and fatherless children in our state. It'll be the church. It'll be you, it'll be me as believers in Christ. And so as an agency, the only thing we do is connect with churches. I don't recruit families. I don't ever go after families. We go after churches. And every week, we're somewhere trying to talk to some church about doing this. And so I want to share a little story with you this morning. It's out of Luke chapter 10, verse 30. And I want to share some facts with you this morning. And then we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to wrap up. Here it is, Good Samaritan. You guys know this story. Go ahead and go to the next slide right there. Okay, we're good. All right. And so here's a Good Samaritan story. You guys all know this story, and I think sometimes we misinterpret it. It says this, Jesus replied and said, so there's a question, and we're going to come back to that question at the end. It says, there was a man who was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, and they stripped him, and they beat him, and they leaving him half dead. So do y'all see the man in the story right there? He's a nameless man. No one knows who he is. He probably wasn't a CEO, probably wasn't president of a company. He was probably just a common guy, and it's very interesting because many theologians believe that the group Jesus is talking to probably just came down that road, and that this actually might have just happened, and some of these guys actually saw it. Now, we don't know that for sure, but you can read commentaries, and there's all kinds of views on that. But basically, there's this guy, and he's walking down a road, and for some reason, he's on a road he shouldn't be on. Maybe he should have been there. For some reason, he gets beat up, and they leave him on the ditch, and he's half dead. And so, but it's interesting because he doesn't have a name, and he's just a nameless man. And so one thing we've really tried to do in this last year as we go to churches is we want to talk about nameless kids. And so I want to share some nameless kids with you this morning. Go ahead and go to the next slide right there. This is the stats last year when I came here. Last year when I came to your church, there were 7,633 kids in foster care about a couple weeks after I got here. They pull these numbers about once a quarter in our state. And so I want you to hear that this morning. Loganville High School, if we have a really good football game, everybody shows up in the city. We have about 5,000 or 6,000 people in the stadium. That doesn't happen very often, but I was a chaplain there for years. But 7,633 kids woke up this morning in a home they didn't ask to be put in with a mom and dad that's not theirs that came from an abusive situation. Y'all with me? Okay? So that was last year. At the end of last year, last September, they pulled the number. It was 9,867. And today, that number is over 10,000. Our foster care kids the kids in foster care are growing at a rate that DFACS can't keep up with. They're growing at homes they can't keep up with. In 2012, there were 65 children that died from abuse in our state. 2013, 152. 2014, that number's over 200. You say, Wayne, is that a lot? It's 4 a week. Means before your pastor comes back here next week and preaches where I'm at, that 4 more kids will die from abuse in our state. Wayne, how old are most of those kids? Under the age of 5. The largest group in foster care today are 5-year-old and under. Many of them, 3,856, are under the age of 5 out of that 10,000. 1,192 are under the age of 1. Most of those are abandoned babies. When I got into foster care and I went to churches and started talking, this is what they told me. Wayne, the only kids in foster care are older kids and their sibling groups. I want you to know that is not true at all. Most of the kids in foster care are children under the age of 5. They have never been to their first day of kindergarten yet. Wayne, what happened from older kids coming into foster care to younger kids coming into foster care? Well, several things have happened. Number one, DFACS is getting a little more aggressive taking kids, which they should. Okay, when we have 200 kids die from abuse in our state, we should have got those kids quicker. The week of Thanksgiving, we placed 11 kids with our agency that week. We placed 3 sibling groups that week. 2 of the 3 sibling groups came into care because of the death of a sibling. Does that happen? Yeah. Every day. All right? Let me give you another fact here for you. 42% of all the kids in care, so out of the 10,000, 4,200 of those kids that are in care are there because of meth-related issues. Gwinnett County is the largest distributor of meth in our nation. Walton County, Hall County, Barrow County are not far behind it. Last year, Walton County had 420 kids in foster care. We pulled the number last week. It's over 600. And Gwinnett County, did I say Gwinnett County? Gwinnett County. Walton County has somewhere around 100 kids in foster care. We're actually a very low county. So these kids come into care because of meth. Wayne, what goes on with meth? I don't know if you're familiar with meth at all, but meth is 6 times more addicting than any other drug out there. The problem with meth is when you take it one time, it creates such an endorphins and such a high in your body that it can never get back to that. So meth people, once they take it once, they always want that high, and so they never can get back. And so it becomes, they got to buy more, they got to buy more, they got to buy more. Y'all with me? Okay? You can make meth, and so meth is very destructive, okay? You can look at almost half the kids in our state are in care because of meth. All right? And so we deal with a lot of meth. We have a lot of babies that are there because of meth. I told somebody the other day, Friday was a bad day for our agency. Because Friday was the first time I turned down a newborn baby because I didn't have a home for her. And I was calling all my parents, could you please take another one? You know? And so Friday morning I got the phone call. It's a mess, baby. I said, I can't help you. Friday afternoon I was heading to the Woodstock Men's Conference. And I called the county that it's from, and I said, hey, did you find a home for that baby? No. Could you call us back Monday morning? She'll still be here. So we'll be calling her tomorrow morning. I don't know what we're going to do yet, but we're still working on that one. But it's a meth baby, born and abandoned. Mom walked out of the hospital, says she's not coming back. Happens every day. Happens all the time. Here's the next one is this. I want to tell you a story about our first, and we have, I don't know how many kids are there because of meth, but I would say probably 40% of our kids are, I would say the 10 out of the 40 at least are there in our agency because of meth. We had a little girl. We had a little girl and a little boy. And I don't tell you these stories to make you upset. I tell you because I want you to know what goes on. We had a little boy and our girl, and a county called me a couple counties over, and they said, hey, could you take this? We got a 3-year-old girl and a 1-year-old boy. They said, could you take them? And they're Caucasian and blah, 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 blah. And I said, yep, I'll take them. And so we went up, we picked them up, brought them back to our office, and they were hungry. And the lady said, I said, hey, we'll give them some food. She goes, it's probably going to take a couple days to get them full, just so you know. When we bring kids in neglect, it's not because they missed a meal, it's because they haven't been fed for a week, okay? And so we brought these 2 little kids in, and so I began to read. I get a 22-page police report with every child that I get. And so my job is partly what I do is I read the reports, try to figure out where the kids are, what homes are going to fit best in, and then we try to find services for the kids that they need. And so I began to read about these 2 little kids, and I was just like, oh, this is going to be a tough one. And I'm going to be discreet as I can with this. But I want you to know this. These kids are not far from here. The girl and the boy were 3 and 1. Girl 3, boy 1. They were taken into care because their mom tried to hurt herself in front of the children. She tried to commit suicide because she's addicted to meth. So she was put in a psychiatric hospital. They realized after about an hour of calling there was no family members that qualified to come get the children because they all had DFACS history. Is that the worst part? No. The 3-year-old had been sold the day before for a couple hours for some meth. Does that happen a lot? Yeah. And I know there's kids in here, so I'm going to be careful how much I go into that. But we have 2-year-old girls that don't go to court because the biological dads are going to be there, because an uncle's going to be there. And you need to know that's what goes on. Listen, I think sometimes we figure out these nameless kids and we don't figure out what goes on. Listen, I know because I sit in my office every day and answer the phone. Okay? And so there's there's our state right there. Okay, here's the next one. Is this? All right, so this priest comes by. Go ahead and go to the next slide right there. A priest comes by. Priest, pastor, everyone. I'm glad y'all don't have a pastor here this morning because I hate doing this slide when there's a pastor here. There's a priest comes by as a pastor. He's coming down the road, and he sees this guy on the side of the road, and he passes by on the other side. And so maybe he was busy. Maybe he was going to church. Maybe he was late for small group. I don't know. But for some reason, the priest sees the guy on the side of the road, and he just kind of like, the Bible actually says that he moves around and he passes by on the other side. And I always think, what did he think? Why would he not help this guy who's stripped, who's beat, and he's laying on the side of the road? And I always think about that with children. You know, why would we not help them? And this is some of the things that I've heard. Sometimes I think this. They're really not worth it. They're not going to grow up to be anything anyway. They're already damaged goods. This is the one that I think I hear more than anything. It's going to cost our family too much. I mean, I would help, but you got to understand how important travel ball is. I mean, I would take these kids, but my kids are too old. My kids are too young. I have too many kids. This is one I hear. I don't like my kids. Somebody told me that one time. Y'all don't laugh if your kids are sitting next to you. I'll get too attached. And have to give them back. I'm afraid. And all of the excuses that the priest had for not helping this guy seems to be a lot of excuses that we have for not helping people. Does that make sense? For all the excuses that we have, listen, the bottom line is every excuse that we have today, there's still 10,000 kids out there that need homes. Here's the next one is this. The Levi comes by. Nope, is that the next one? Oh, yeah. Nope. I'm sorry. Back up one. To me, this is when you hear about all the facts and excuses, to me, this is the worst one of all of them. In Georgia, 10,000 foster kids, 25,000 Protestant churches. If every church takes one kid, we got 15,000 churches waiting on a kid. Does that make sense? We hear 10,000 kids and we go, man, that's a huge problem. If the church gets engaged, it's really not a big problem. If the church gets engaged, we fix this. We can handle this. And so that's what we do. We try to engage churches as we do this. Hey, I believe this. Believers ought to be leading the fight for these children. We ought to be out looking. We ought to be fighting over these kids and all the reasons that we have not to help them. And listen, if we are one agency, there are other agencies. You can work through DFACS. So I'm not here about growing an agency. I just want you to know this. There's a way you can help. And not everyone has to foster. Not everyone has to adopt. Okay? Here's the next guy is this, the Levi. All right? A Levi comes by, and he also saw them. If you know anything about the Levites, they were kind of the upper tribe. They were the ones, there was really not any people much higher than them. And, I always think the Levi, he sees the guy and he passes by on the other side. And maybe he just thought, maybe he just thought I was going to get my hands dirty. I got my nice clothes on today. And let me tell you something, is fostering a dirty business? Yeah, it's dirty. Do you get in some sticky situations? Yeah. Do you have parents? I've had biological parents that if they could have gotten to me in a courtroom, it probably wouldn't have been good for me. Do you find yourself in tough situations? Yeah. Are you walking into some spiritual warfare? Yeah. And I think the Levi, maybe he just thought, maybe he didn't want to get dirty. Maybe, I don't know what he thought. But the Bible says that it's so cool because he says he sees him. Y'all see that? And then he passed by on the other side. And really, to be honest with you, the number one thing I hear when I go to churches is we just didn't know. And so the good thing is after this morning, you all know. All right? So you can't use that excuse anymore. We didn't know. So let me give you some more facts right here, and then we're going to go to the next verse. Ready? Here we go. Over 200 kids died from abuse last year. I got that. Over 600 kids aged out last year. And I won't come back to that one. Listen to this. 60 to 80% of our children were abused again in DFACS foster homes. What does that mean? That means a kid's taken out of an abusive situation. They're put in a foster home, abused again in the foster home. 60 to 80%. What does that tell you? Believers aren't involved. Did you know that there are actually predators that look to foster and adopt children so they can't abuse them? Because they're an easy target. You know why? Because if the kid's been abused, and they'll say, well, we know all foster kids lie. So who's going to believe you? And you know what? Sometimes that's true. They also now that say 60 to 80% of our kids have emotional problems. I'm like, 60 to 80% are abused again in foster homes, 68% have emotional problems. I don't know, I could probably do a correlation between that. Listen to this number. 12 kids every week in our state age out of foster care. Wayne, what does that mean? That means that every week in our state that 12 children will turn 18, the checks will stop, they've not been adopted, and they will become homeless. A child, if he turns 18 before he graduates high school in our state in foster care, has a better chance of going to prison than he does graduating high school. Atlanta is the #1 city for trafficking in the United States. People say, oh, those girls are being abducted. No, they're not. Because when they're abducted, you hear about it all over the news. Everybody shuts down to go look for that girl. That's not where they're coming from. You know where they're coming from? Foster care. That's where they're coming from. And so what we've learned through this system is this. What we learned through the system is this. These kids are not coming into foster care at 14, 15, 16, aging out at 18. They're coming into foster care at 2, 3, 4, staying in the system their entire life, never finding an adoptive home, aging out at 18, becoming homeless, and then they're having children, putting children right back in foster care. The saddest case, this was a bad week at the office, the saddest case we had was this week. We picked up a little 2-month-old, little boy, not far from here, and reading the reports and everything, the mom aged out of foster care 9 months ago. I knew when the worker called me and told me that she had a long history with a family. I was like, the kid's 2 months old, how do you have a long history? And she said, the girl that just had the baby, I had her for her last 4 years in foster care. What did that girl miss? She didn't have a family. At 18, she became homeless. What did she do? She moved in with the guy to have a house. What happened when she got pregnant? She became homeless. The boy moved on. She has a baby. She can't take care of the baby. Where does the baby go? Back in foster care. What happens if we don't take care of these 10,000 kids in our churches? What's it going to look like 5 years from now? It's not going to be 4,000. It's going to be 14,000. It's going to be 20,000. In fact, this week we picked up 2 babies that were both had by children in foster care. Here's the next one is this. These kids that age out of foster care, and you know, we've always sort of told everybody we're the agency that helps out. We're the agency that helps younger kids, and we have very few older kids with our agency, simply just because as a staff I'm not quite prepared to deal with some of the behavior issues and those kind of things. And so this week, does God ever set y'all up? Like set you up to walk into a situation where he's getting ready to teach you a lesson? Well, this week, God set me up. Actually, it was Friday morning. I was picking up a kid. He was from Valdosta, Georgia, and he was 6 months old. And they were bringing him to Fulton County for some reason. Anyway, I don't understand all that. I'm sure my office does. But I was basically just going to pick the kid up. And so I'm heading down there to pick the kid up. And we opened like 4 homes last week, and we got 5 homes opening up next week, which is really good because those 5 homes will probably take in somewhere between 8 to 10 kids next week. And so we're kind of excited, you know. And my little girls are from Fulton County, and there's a lady named Sarah down there who kind of runs a lot of Atlanta, and so I kind of wanted to run into her, you know, and I was going to get the kid, but I was also going to run into her. That's the business side of me coming out. And so I'm down there, and so I go up to the 2nd floor of this building at Stonewall Tail Road, and I go in there, I say, hey, I'm Wayne Nagle, I'm United Hope for Children, I'm here to get the little child, blah, 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 age and all that stuff, and so I can't tell you all that. And they say, oh, it'll be just a minute. And so say, we're changing his diaper, we're getting him ready, so they finally bring him out. And this DFACS worker comes out, and she hands me the child, and this little boy comes out. He's probably 15, 16 years old, and he comes out. He's bringing the bags and everything, and I thought he was 16, and I said, oh, are you the transporter? And he said, I'm the junior transporter. And in my mind, I'm focused on the kid. I'm thinking maybe the dad's taking his son around, took him out of school, or something. To be honest with you, I was so focused on what I was doing, I kind of heard it, but I didn't really connect it. And So we're loading everything up, and the DFAX worker says, hey, would you like me to help you take the stuff to the car? I said, that'll be great. So we're loading everything up, and the little boy's kind of coming down there, and the worker's telling me, Mr. Nagle, we just thank you so much for what you're doing. I think we have like 20 of our kids are from Fulton County. You're doing a lot. I said, yeah. I said, well, it's been good. We connect with churches, and I'm kind of trying to share Christ and the church with her a little bit and just talking to her. And she said, do you have any more homes open right now? And I said, no, I actually don't. I said, but Monday morning, I know we're going to have 4 or 5 more homes. We're entering in the state website. We'll have them open in anywhere from 2 days or anywhere from a day to 2 or 3 days, depending on how busy they are. And so she's like, that's great. We'll probably fill your homes up. I mean, our homes, the day you get approved, you get a kid because there's just that many kids out there. And so she said, well, that's great, Mr. Nagle. And the little boy kept calling me sir. He's sir. And he said, sir? He said, you got 5 homes opening up next week? And I said, yep. And I said, we're doing good, and I'm having a little bit of a prideful moment here. And he said, sir, that's really good. And I said, yeah, thank you. And so I'm putting the baby in the car, and the DFAX worker walks off, and we're loading all the stuff up. He said, sir? I said, yeah. He said, do you think one of those homes would want me? And I figured it out. He was 15, and there was no home for him. So the state was paying a transportation person to ride around with them because there was nowhere for him to go. And I sat there, and I thought, what am I supposed to tell this 15-year-old boy? And he goes, I've been in foster care for a while. And he said, I just really like to find a family. And I thought, oh, my goodness. I told my wife. She said, well, you're finding him a home next week, so I'm finding him a home next week, so that's what I'm going to be working on. And I thought, man, there's a boy that just needs a family. So we'll be expanding our vision a little bit with our agency. And a lot of kids out there, they just want a family. And that's what we do. He's one that, to be honest with you, at 15 years old, if he doesn't get taken by a family pretty soon, he will not be adopted. He will age out at 18, and he will become homeless. That's what's going to happen to him. Here's the next guy in our story. Luke chapter 10, 33, next slide right there says this. He says, but a Samaritan was on a journey. The Samaritan guy, people didn't like the Samaritans. They were half Jew, they were half Gentile, they weren't from any tribe, they lived in their own city, their own little town called Samaria. The Jews would actually walk 3 days around to keep from having to cut through Samaria, and he came on a journey, and he came upon him, and he saw him, and this is where the whole story changes place. The Bible says that he saw him, and what did he do? He felt compassion for him. And he came to him, and he bandaged up his wounds, and he poured out his wine on them, and he put them on his own beast, and he brought them to his inn, and he took care of them. And if you know that Jesus is standing with a bunch of Jews, they didn't like this story. Because here's a nameless Samaritan who's not really anything in the community, taking care of another nameless guy on the side of the road who's been beat up, bleeding. He's not going to get any credit for it. And so the Samaritan actually did what the religious people should have done. The sad part is this. Sometimes it's even the lost world helps kids out more than believers do. And I just keep going back in my head. 25,000 churches. 10,000 kids. I just cannot get my head around how that's okay. I just do not understand. I've tried to figure it out, but I can't. We're getting ready to wrap up. Let's look at these 3 guys right here. Go to the next slide right there. The priest saw the man, he moved away, and he passed by, and it cost him nothing. The Levi saw the man, he moved away, he passed by, and it cost him nothing. The Samaritan saw the man, he moved closer, he stopped, and it cost him everything. Hey, let me just say this. Ministry that costs nothing accomplishes nothing. Does that make sense? People always say, man, my faith in Jesus doesn't cost me anything. And it probably doesn't. It's probably not worth anything. The next passage there It says ministry is expensive. Go ahead and go to the next one right there. And I love this passage because when our churches get this attitude, we'll fix foster care, we'll fix homelessness, we'll fix a lot of things. But listen to this. It says on the next day, he is a Samaritan. He took 2 denarii, and he gave it to the innkeeper. About 2 days' wage is what he took. And he said, take care of him, and whatever you spend, when I return, I will repay you. What was his limit on spending for this nameless guy on the side of the road? What was the limit? There's no limit. Here's what he said. You take care of him, and no matter what you spend, when I get back, I'll repay you. The Samaritan had the right attitude. I love that song. You talk about love, Lord God, with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and everything we love God with. But this Samaritan in the story, now whether it was a true story or not, whether Jesus was telling it or not, he captured the essence of Christianity. So whatever it cost us to meet a need, that's what we're going to do. Whatever we got to do to meet it, that's what we're going to do. See, this is what I believe. For whatever you spend on a person is the value you place on that person. Does that make sense? Whatever I spend on somebody, that's the value. So most people think they're just not valuable enough. Okay? And so this is a guy here that says, you know what? Whatever it costs. We sort of went into this thing with an attitude of saying, hey, whatever it costs, we're going to do. I want to tell you a couple things about our agency right now. We got into this and we figured these kids have a lot of issues. Speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, all these things are going on. And so, I don't know, some of you guys may know this. A couple months ago, one of our board members bought the Tommy Wages Funeral Home that's up here on Highway 81. And he bought it out of a estate. It was a big mess. And, whoops, that was me. And we started praying. He said, Wayne, I want you to pray about whether you could pull this thing off or not, whether our board can and what we can do. And so this is what we figured out. Our kids need physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. They need to see pediatricians. They need to see dentists. They need a daycare that understands behavior issues and attachment disorders, and they're not potty trained by a certain age. We need counselors in there, Christian counselors, that will not teach them that the lifestyle they feel like their alternative lifestyle is okay, but we need counselors that will help them with a biblical view and a biblical worldview. And so we had a little fundraiser November the 18th, and we said, hey, we need basically $950,000. And I went through bankruptcy in 2008, and so I was really not the guy to lead this. And I really didn't want to work with banks at all, because if you're a banker, I'm sorry, but when you don't need them, they're there, and when you need them, they got a form for you to fill out or something, okay? So sorry. But let me tell you what happened. Next week, we close on that building without a bank, with donors. We're $35,000 short. We're going to get it in the next week or so. Our physical, speech, occupational therapist has already moved in. We're meeting our pediatrician on Tuesday. They're moving in. We're still looking for counselors. Our daycare, we have a guy coming in 2 weeks that wants to fund the whole thing to get it up and running. It's all underneath a nonprofit. It is all faith-based, because this is what our board said and what we've gone into this thing. Hey, whatever it takes to do, that's what we're going to do for these kids. And that's what it takes. We have 7 full-time people now. We are hiring people as fast as I can find them that have a degree in social work or something, early childhood education, and have a desire to work 24 hours a day and be on call 24/7 and just know every holiday you're going to be working, because kids are out of school, and that's when we're going to be taking kids in. But so they're not really easy to find. But here's the question. Here's the question. Go ahead, next one right there. It says this. It says, which of these 3 men do you think proved to be the neighbor, the one who fell in the robber's hands? And he said, the one who showed mercy to him. And he said to the Samaritan, he said, you Levites and priests and lawyers, you go and do the same. That's what I want you to do. I want you go and do the same thing. And so how cool is that? Jesus used this Samaritan.
For joining us today. We want you to know that you are always welcome at the Summit. We are located on Highway 81 south of Loganville. Sunday school is at 9 a.m. and worship is at 10:30 a.m. For more information, you can visit our website at thesummitchurch.com.